London, I would say in 87 or 88. And he was not really, he was doing a lot of work, but he was not doing any objects. So he was part of this whole group coming out of goldsmiths and being extremely active. He was writing a lot. He was doing a lot of parallel projects to whatever one would expect a classic artist activity. He was already a big thinker around what was happening, so a lot of people thought that he would probably be much more ending up as a critic or as a curator. He was writing for Art Monthly, he was thinking about exhibitions, he was thinking about architecture, he worked a bit at the Carsten Schubert Gallery. I mean, there was a lot of other things he was doing. And then he did this collaboration with Henry Bond on the documents, and he was more part of the writing part and Henry of the content. So very quickly he was certainly the brightest mind around all of that. He was let but it was less like you could say, oh, you go to, he didn't have a studio, so you would not go and say, oh, I like this painting, I would like to show this, but it was more like you had a discussion with him, and then that would lead to another discussion. So, I don't remember, I think we only started to do, there was, I'm very bad in dates, but there was a project I think I did in 1990 or 91 with, was it already 92? I mean, it was with, you could also, with Dominique at the gallery, where we invited him, and he made an address book as his participation. As he was also not really producing anything you could tactile, objects. It was probably also not. It took a while until we found a way, or I said, whatever you want to do a show. Well, that was the McNamara. I think that was 94. But he was part of a group show, I think, or project I did. I think that was 92. And then I showed but I didn't, if you go back, we're trying to put that together at the moment. If you look back at these first year, there was also not always a very linear exhibition program. I kind of also liked the idea what Philippe and Pierre did, not Pierre Wiegmann, Pierre Joseph, that when they did this exhibition called Once Upon a Time in City Build, basically they took over the Peter Fendt exhibition, was the exhibition running there before they came, and then they added things on top of it. Peter kind of built this possible maquettes and proposals for possible cities of the future. And they came in and kind of made a film and made advertising and kind of made the whole surroundings as if this was really going to happen. So they made a kind of mise en scène. There was a video of a young actress, French actress at the time, who was telling how life would then be in City Build, which was the name Peter Fendt gave to his future cities. And then, and then they did a whole advertising program and props and photos of what that could be. So there was a lot more of that kind of activities going on. So yes, I think the first thing I showed from Leon was this address book.
It was just after the document series with Henry Bond, I think it was.
No, it was parallelly.
because I heard that he was during that period he was working with Bond, he was collecting all the visit cards that he used after for these address books.
Yeah, that's possible.
Mm.
That's possible.
And it was from there that he originated to think about this other work that we are now working on called Lost Paradise. So all these different level and layer of information, how an information can be shared, but also how can you, the way you vehiculate the information shape the truthfulness of this information, the legitimation. And I think he was talking about this address book.
I think that they had a period of time where they worked extremely intensively together. I mean, for both of them, that was the work they were doing. They weren't doing any work outside or aside of that. And then Liam would definitely start to have a couple of you would maybe not call them works, but you would call them interventions he would do in exhibitions or in venues, and then slowly Henry would start to do his own series, and then they would regroup in some circumstances to continue to do work. So if you go back to the documents, there is a very intensive moment, and then things are getting loosened up. But there's not much, I mean, I don't have much recollections from how that really, how the chronology of that time was. We also used to hang out much more together. I mean, all of us. I mean, when Eric did the No Man's Time, we would just be hanging around 2 weeks in Nice and things. I mean, a life which I think with a lot of tendresse, you say that, back, but it's so far away also it's so very different from the way we are operating now, which I think has more to do with age than with anything else.
But at that moment, did you have the feeling that something was going on between you?
Between me and Liam?
No, I mean in general, in the group, and like when you were like, because all you are telling us, it's really, like it's always easy to see the past from the present, but I'm interested in understanding if at that moment you were perceiving the fact that something was going on, that something important.
Oh, sure. I would have certainly not to, you know, this was it was certainly not the easiest, neither work nor path to follow to be involved in this type of questions and this type of work, and at that time. And if I would not have been completely convinced that this was absolutely the right thing, that we were absolutely having suddenly working on something which was new, which was, yeah, I mean, remettre en question, you would say in French, everything else which we have been educated or taught with, I mean, oh yes, I was completely sure that this was something worth and extremely important. Later you have, you know, there's always, I always say, you know, later there's always life in between.
Yeah, of course.
Relationships, children, Some of these projects have been defined or outlined in a rather timeless or rather universal way, so that you have something which is more like a mode d'emploi, and it's interesting if you apply it to see what happens in wherever you do it or not. Some of these things were so time and context specific that if you take it out of the context, there's no really any meaning anymore. So you really have to do historic. It's a very classic art historian work you have to do now. Is to analyze the different bits of whatever it is you want to redo, and find out if it can be translated in another time and another place. If it would have been interesting to translate that in another time or another place, this is very... I mean, you have the same kind of questions when it gets back to work which has a very strong technical definition. Are Super 8 films something you can digitalize? Or I have that a lot with the artist I'm working with, a lot of sound work which was done on tape recorder. And there's something, it's very different if you have an interactive sound piece which is working with a tape cassette, than if it's digital, because a cassette is still an analog instrument. So when you cut the sound, you end up at another moment because it continues to work, whereas digitally you can program everything, and then it's completely absurd to program back something digital to work analog in an analog way. It's the same type of question you have to ask yourself. So I could only answer that more project specific.